You don't give to receive. You don't you don't give to receive. You give to give. You give because you know it's going to help whoever that person is. And
Right.
that's very, very important for me. It's deeply rooted in my soul to be uh, in service to others.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Paul Mossman, your host here with the Leader Seeds podcast. I'm really excited for today's conversation. This has been another conversation that's been on my heart from the beginning of Leader Seeds. You know, when you have conversations with close friends and maybe even close neighbors about leadership, and you just know I got to get this conversation on the show. You're going to have a lot of value in today's show. We're talking to my really good friend, Aaron Quiroz. Aaron is the founder and the executive director of the Charlie Mike Project. He's also a Marine for about 8-10 years, and he's continuing to go out there to serve the military, the veterans, and just really the community. So I'm excited to have you on today's show, Aaron. How are you there? Are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm here. I'm excited, man. We've been talking about leadership for some time. We just didn't get it on the show, huh?
Yeah, yeah, we have. We've had some late night talks, watching fireworks, talking about it. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this today.
Awesome. And I think there's a natural progression in that I think is really exciting. And for the listeners, I think you're going to really feel that conversation in today's. It's not so much interview style. It's really just you're here with us. We're just kind of like Aaron just said, we're watching some fireworks, we're talking some leadership and some real life leadership, some real life situations going on today. This series on the show is really focusing on leadership and the combination for military. So I like to kind of, if you could, Aaron, maybe start us in that journey, in your journey with leadership, if you could.
Sure. Yeah. So funny enough, my journey in leadership started in 11th grade. It was a really weird situation, and I'll make it brief. But I was in a Cisco networking class because I was in like a college prep. I went to two high schools, like half the day regular high school, half the day college prep high school, right? And um, the second half was the Cisco networking. And, my teacher, still remember his name, Mr. Bynum, big, tall, black dude, real strong. He was a Navy SEAL, actually, which is weird because Navy SEAL, but he's teaching Cisco networking. Like, what? Right.
Right.
And actually, you know what? That's the first time I thought about that. We can dive back into that later. But anyways, we had a vote in the beginning of the school year to a class leader. So I vote for whoever, I'll vote for this person. I don't remember who I voted for because it was so long ago. At the end of the thing, everything's tallied up, and it's like, we all know it's going to be one or two people, right? 100%, 100%.
Right.
And I promise you, my name was not casted one time, like at all, not once. And Mr. Bynum says, "All right, Aaron is our leader." And I I didn't understand it. I understand it now, but I didn't back then. And the reason why I understand it now is because I didn't have any biases towards anybody.
Wow. Wow.
And I didn't get that for a really long time. I mean, it must have taken me about, that was, I don't know, whatever age, 15, 16.
Yeah.
But I didn't figure that out till I was about 30.
Wow.
As I thought about it. And it's true. I didn't have any biases because I didn't know anybody because I was new to the area. Right. So he didn't have to worry about me like trying to give this person this and that person that. Right.
Right.
But the funny thing is, as I got older and I used that like in the back of my head, like, oh, I can lead because he saw something in me, and he did see something in me. I didn't know it at the time, obviously. As a young child, it's difficult to understand all the little things that are coming at you, trying to figure out what's this, what's that. And that really did, honestly, it projected me in the leadership path from the get-go. Um, yeah, and I was in that school for 2 years, and both years I was the class leader.
He was appointed the
Um,
leader. What was his name again? Teacher was
Mr. Bynum.
Mr. Bynum. And Mr. Bynum taught this Cisco class, but at the same time, he was a retired Navy SEAL.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Wow. Wow.
Yep.
There's so much alignment, in the moment, in hindsight, right? That we're looking at now that, like you said, you just made that connection. But even, I mean, I'm just, we've had many conversations on leadership, and that's what I love about getting a chance to kind of get it on here on the show, because I haven't heard that story before. And as you share that, I'm just thinking like that's such an important thing to see in someone. We always have where someone's seen something in me, but not everyone can say they know what they've seen. And here you're sharing exactly what he's seen, and that's the ability to kind of not draw this favoritism and not draw this bias view, right? And that right off the bat, I mean, that's a healthy stance as a leader. So my mind's going, and I'm even more excited about today's conversation. After that, how was that leadership experience? Actually being in there and leading, being in that leadership position.
Yeah, it was good. I actually was the one that had to proctor tests, even though I wasn't. I know I wasn't the best student. 100% wasn't the best student.
Mm-hmm.
I was maybe out of the 25 kids, maybe top 5, because I really liked it. But being able to proctor the test, make sure nobody's cheating. I could actually like log on to their computer while they were doing work to make sure they weren't cheating. Like, and it was expected of me to do that. You know what I mean? And sometimes, funny quick bit. Sometimes Mr. Bynum would be like, "Watch this," and he'll log into their computer and mess with their screen and their mouse. Like, what? I'm just watching the person. So, like, he made it really fun. But we had a really, really, really strong connection. I went back after I graduated high school and spoke to his students one time, and then I think about 3 or 4 years ago from now, I found out that he had passed randomly. So that was tough. Like, wow, this guy saw something in me. I didn't get really a chance to say thank you because I didn't know it until I got older. You know what I mean? But and again, the transition from being a nothing to class leader, and then being the class leader and doing all that, it was really good for my soul, because I really think that it taught me how to be like you alluded to, no bias, and I was treating everybody fairly and equally. And I really do think, like you said, that's one of the most important things when it comes to being a leader. Like you treat everybody the same, right? You treat people how you want to be treated, essentially. Like that's the full way that I look at it. So anyway, sorry, I know I could keep going on that, but
that is a great point, because a lot of times we can get excited about leadership, right? We can get excited about leading certain people or even certain assignments when it's everybody that, like, it's our friend group, and we get all the support and we get all the, that's one side of leadership. But also the other coin of leadership, the other side of the coin, I should say more appropriately, is when you have to lead people that may not completely agree, or maybe they have different styles or different opinions, and you're still called to lead. You're still called to lead. I mean, I'm sure you got, many different situations in your career, in your upbringing, even in your service time, of being appointed to lead a group of people, and not really having all of that, what we call like relational equity. I know in the service, a lot of times when you're appointed to lead a lot of people, I know for myself, you don't have years of knowing these people, and they got to trust you with important things like their life. right?
Sure.
Like they got so you got to build a great amount of trust with people right away, and you don't have that history behind you that other relation or other assignments might have in a work environment, right? It's big decisions, it's a lot of trust involved, and at the end of the day, it's really just kind of being able to be fair. And that's why I think it's so important when someone sees a leader that doesn't have that biased view, like how you're saying, they're able to trust them. The trust factor goes up much more, because if they're hesitant to, am I their favorite or am I not? You're gonna have people
Right.
that's gonna win because they're favorite, and then you're gonna have everyone else that's like, no matter how hard I try, I'm not in that person's favor. So you kind of equal the field, and there's an old passage saying about like how we rise together, and I think
Sure.
that's the healthy component when a leader really does that. Now, this was in your school years.
Correct. Yeah, my junior and senior year.
At that point, did you have an interest in the military?
Well, I always had an interest in the military just because my grandfather was a Marine.
Mm,
Um, so like there was always that little bit of like, I can do this too. He was a Marine. I know, like, it's just because he raised me. So like there was an affinity for the Marine Corps, just I guess the military in general, right? But what really drove me to joining the Marine Corps was 9/11. 9/11 happened my senior year of high school, the first week of high school.
oh, okay.
Um, so I when that happened, I just remember, getting yelled at from my grandma, come downstairs and watching the TV, it's still ingrained in my head. And I think within that week, I asked to take an ASVAB test, and within the next few months, after going through like the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, you know, I knew deep down I wanted to be a Marine. After that, I had to go through all of them to make sure, right? You know what I mean? And you know, recruiters, they're gonna say whatever they want to say just to get you. Um,
Right.
but that's kind of where um, the real, I don't know, I guess leadership for me kind of began. But keep in mind, as my grandfather raised me, and my grandmother, I was always taught do the right thing even when nobody's watching. And like it was clear and evident to me, like if I didn't like do the things I was supposed to do without even being told, so I guess basically creating my own initiative, I was going to pay for it, regardless of, even if I didn't do it wrong and but I just didn't do it, I was going to pay for it. And my grandpa would be like, all right, you want to, okay, you're going to go wash your car and you're going to wash the truck. Then you're going to go do the lawn. And then you know what I mean? But what happens is like, I become accustomed to doing those things. So I just start doing them because he said I had to do it. And I was like, well, I'm just going to do them because I don't want to get yelled at if I don't do them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Um, but that's where it started.
Yeah.
My grandparents, of course, my grandmother, she's Mexican. She take off her, we call it chancla, but her slipper and slap me across the head if I do something wrong, or her wooden spoon that was at the table. Like you never know what's coming because my back is always the kitchen.
You gotta
Just
be
whack.
ready. You gotta be ready
Yeah, you
for it.
gotta be ready. And my grandparents didn't like abuse me, but I got my fair share of spankings, and hey, you messed up, whack. All
Right.
right, got it. So with that being said, like there's a small little piece that I take from them because they did teach me those values, and those values are what essentially I've taught to my kids. And of course, this generation can be a little bit lazy, but
Mm.
that's a whole nother ball game. So, but yeah, so that the leadership that I have started there, I'll say in a sense, but it became evident with Mr. Bynum, and then as I did and I joined the Marine Corps, that's where it really started to blossom, and it took some time though,
Mm.
right? we
Mhm.
can talk, we can figure out how you want to transition to that. But it took some time for me to actually go from joining the Marine Corps to being in the Marine Corps to seeing like what leadership was, because I was very, very what's the word for it? Uh Visually aware of my surroundings at all times. I was like constant awareness because
Uh,
I wanted to see, I wanted to understand what was going on. So I was like, I guess you could call me a people watcher.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and that's how I learned, but I learned from people's mistakes. I learned from my mistakes. And, um, I was also taught in the right way. But, we can go into that and, how you want to dive into it.
Well, I can definitely relate with you on that. And what I always tell people is that I'm a student even when there's not a teacher, and I think that's what it says. It's like if you're always looking for something to learn, you don't need a formal teacher in front of you. You don't need a course. You don't need a level of instruction. You're always observing and you're always pulling into these cues that's all around us, that's really surrounding us, even in our upbringing. And sometimes we see them only in hindsight, but as we can sharpen that, as you're mentioning now, you don't have to see them just in hindsight. You start to kind of sharpen it and you start to see it in real time when you see things unfold and you're like, oh, look what happened there. Oh, and you pick up in a sense of what I call patterns. Pattern recognition in life is one of the greatest insights. We can dive more into that now, and we'll
Yeah.
actually dive more into that transition you mentioned, because I know the listeners on today's show is really going to get a lot of value in seeing the transition from what you've experienced, from like how you're identifying from your grandparents to Mr. Bynum, to your service and your response to September 11th, because we've all kind of experienced it, but our response to situations is a unique thing to observe and to pick up from. Right now, we'll take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back on the next slide.
Hi, I'm Bridget from the Beehive. Yesterday, Beehive Las Vegas hosted our back to school event. We helped over 100 children receive free backpacks and free school supplies. We wanted to say thank you to our community for all the donations. If you want to find out more about the Beehive, please look for our IG at the Beehive Buzz.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you for our sponsors in today's show, making all of this possible, all these conversations on leadership. We're talking to Aaron Quiroz right now, and we just kind of open up this experience that you had and how you responded to September 11th. As you were watching that, I believe you said a senior in high school, you seen what was going on, and basically the world is watching this event that's happening right now. Individually, we all had our own ways of responding, and maybe take us back to how did you respond? What did you do? And where did that lead? Where did that lead in your direction?
Sure. So there's always been a like a inner part of me that has always wanted to help others.
Hmm.
I'll tell you how I really felt. I felt guilty watching that happen. I felt like, and I know that I had nothing to do with it, but I felt guilty watching it because, I knew people were dying. I knew that there was, firefighters, policemen out there trying to help others. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here watching this happen. Right. As a young kid, I didn't truth be told, I didn't know what I was feeling then, but I do now because I understand it. And that whole week, all I did was think about like, I got to do something to not let this happen again. And that's all I kept saying to myself. Like, I got to do something. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where, I thought, oh, you know what? Mr. Bynum was in the Navy SEAL. And that's actually the first place I went to, the Navy, is to talk to them. I was like, I want to be a Navy SEAL because,
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But when I talked to them, I just didn't like what they told me, and so on and so forth, the Army, Air Force. And it always came back to the Marine Corps. But I took the test for it's called an ASVAB test for all military people out there that, or don't know this. Basically, it allows you to choose the kind of job type you want once you get into the service. So I actually, believe it or not, I had signed up to be communications in the Marine Corps. Because like, I thought that would be the best bet. I could learn and I could, do stuff and still be a Marine. The reason why that didn't happen was because after I graduated high school, I thought like, okay, like 1 or 2 months, I'm out of here. Right.
Right.
Yeah, no. So I had to wait. And this is something, you young kids out there will understand this, or maybe not understand it, but at least you'll learn from this, is there's got to be a class opening for you to go there. Like, so they said, oh yeah, 7 months. And I was like, huh? 7 months? I'm not waiting 7 months.
Right.
Yeah. So I actually waited 4 months and I was like, this is it. I can't do this anymore. So I signed up. I told them, put me in whatever. I don't care what it is. Send me. And of course, infantry, because we always need more people in infantry. We call them grunts for a reason, but the reality of it is yes, there are, some not so bright, I would say, people that do serve in the infantry side of things. But for the majority, you actually have to be extremely intelligent to be infantry, because life and death matters when it comes to that. So I joined 2003, January 11th. And, that's kind of where the journey started.
Wow.
And, like, I knew I had to do something, and that was my way to give back.
Seeing something so intense, seeing this, and I remember it playing, and it wasn't like you seen it once. Like it would replay and replay
All day,
replay all day, every channel, over and over, and it's kind of this. It was embedded in a lot of our psyche and in our so it was intensified and much more than just a moment, right? And kind of letting that marinate in a sense, but responding to it, right? Your response in that moment was to go out there and to, like you said, process a little bit of this guilt, but also process a little bit of this. What am I going to do? What am I going to do to help this? Going ahead through the process of talking to recruitment, joining the Marines, and then now you're off in boot camp. And I'd love to hear, we hear, if anyone has gone through the military and gone through boot camp, and especially in the Marines, that there's a certain level of standard, right? There's a certain standard, there's a certain of an expectation that some people see it and they're like, not for me. And other people see it and it's like, that's my standard. That's my people, so you obviously seeing your grandfather, in that kind of live that standard, in a sense, having a teacher that was so influential with you, be a Navy SEAL, also have that standard and expectation. To me, it made perfect sense that you seen a situation and you kind of rose to the expectation. You're like, you know what? This is what's expected. I'm just going to go ahead and jump in there. Now, in a place too, like you said, with infantry, I know a lot of, in-house in the military, a lot of us, we always say, no matter what your MOS, soldier first, right? You're a soldier first. It doesn't matter what tech skills you do or anything. At the end of the day, you're a soldier first. I'd love to hear, and I think everyone here on the episode would love to hear, one leadership assignment or experience you had in the Marines, whether it was at boot camp or at an assignment, deployment, whatever it was. But one thing that really comes back to you when you think about this, I want to say, transition into the military. You're a new recruit, you're learning the ropes, going through boot camp. You've seen it from a perspective, but now you're in it. Now you're in the role.
Yeah. Well, there's quite a few little ones in there that in the beginning that actually were, I guess, transformational for me. I guess the biggest one for me. So, after boot camp, actually during boot camp, I hurt my shoulder. I didn't tell anybody. I finished boot camp. I went to the School of Infantry, finished that with a busted torn ligament and torn labrum in my shoulder. Didn't tell nobody. And, we're carrying packs, all that. I didn't realize that I had that actual injury. I just knew I was hurt.
Yeah.
Right. And then when I got to the fleet here in Hawaii, I was just like, okay, now I'm going to cry wolf because like I need to get fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I ended up getting shoulder surgery. And while I was healing, well, actually, while I was waiting for my surgery and while I was healing, they put me in the office so that I could still do work. As it still was an infantry battalion,
Sure.
but I got put into the office.
Mhm.
While I was there, I was the clerk, the main clerk, which generally would go to what they call an S1 guy. But I had technical skills that everybody knew that I was the tech geek, even though I was infantry, I was the tech geek.
Right.
So they put me in the office, which it really worked. Honestly, it was the biggest transformational period of me being in the Marine Corps, other than one other time, which is at the end. But
Okay.
I'm in there learning all these different things. And now, as a Marine, you actually said as a soldier, you're basic soldier first, but in the Marine Corps, every Marine's a basic rifleman. That's what we say. It's always that, right? No matter if you're in the office guy, logistics, you're a rifleman, period. And that's a Marine thing. But that being said, I learned a lot of the side of infantry, but I didn't know how the Marine Corps actually worked. Like I didn't understand like where things came from, how we got this, that, and this. And what I did was being in the office because I was the main clerk and working under, the first sergeant, which is an E8, and then the CO, was, learning how everything else worked in the Marine Corps. And it was eye-opening because I didn't know like I don't think you understand, even from the outside perspective, like the logistics, the paperwork, the way things have to work in order for you to have what you need to go fight the bad guys.
Yeah.
Right. Even down to the cooks, like the cooks, they got to make you the food and we're in charge of them too. It's like, wow, there's so many different things. You know what I mean? That was one of the biggest transformational periods. And while I was in there learning those things, and I'll always remember them. I remember them more than I remember any other name except for a handful. And I can say those later on, but First Sergeant Frisbee and Gunnery Sergeant Randall, those two guys, they kind of get emotional thinking about it. They taught me what being a Marine was really about.
Wow.
And the reason I say that is because not only was the like camaraderie there, but they actually cared about me as a person, not just a Marine.
Wow.
And the way so when I learned like watching them, like, and it'd be funny too, because like I could watch them chew someone's ass out, like full on, just right. And then come up to me and be like, "Hey, you see this guy, Quiroz? Da 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 da." I'm like, "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant. Yes, First Sergeant." Who I was talking to, and it's just funny because they could unload and then full be on. So how you doing? What you up to today? Da, da, da. And it's like, wait, but you were just,
yeah,
you're okay. It's very weird to see that transition right and happen. And people watching, you're like, oh man, okay. And that's kind of where I learned like also the bias thing. It's not good leaders don't have that. It's, hey, you messed up, you're gonna get your ass chewed, fix it. I'm back to being regular, gunnery sergeant, first sergeant. That's just how it is. I don't need to be angry at everybody else because I chewed you out. It's true though, right? I didn't, and I only,
good.
Yeah, and I didn't understand it until I watched it happen.
Yeah.
And they taught me everything. I mean, from inside out of how the Marine Corps worked. And oh man, when first sergeant, who actually got promoted to sergeant major while I was there, I sat there and I was the guy. You're familiar with like when people get promoted, right? I mean, I don't know how it is for you guys, but for us, it's like you got the CO and whoever is like the highest enlisted, and then you got somebody there reading the promotion certificate, and that was me, right? Because I was they're the guys, and I'm just da, 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 okay, and then I'm sitting there waiting to hold it and hand it and blah blah blah. So I'm sitting there watching my first sergeant, get promoted to sergeant major, and I knew he had to leave because once you get promoted, you have to go actually lead a battalion as opposed to just a company.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was full heartbroken because like he was like the best leader I ever had, other than Gunny Randall, who was going to be there for a little bit longer, and then he was leaving. And the coolest thing happened, right? And this is kind of why. I mean, this is really why, like, I loved the Marine Corps. My first sergeant, in the Marine Corps, we wear our chevrons on our collars, right? You guys have yours like right here in the patch and on the hat. We have ours right here.
Yeah.
So when he got promoted, he took off his old ones and then he put on the sergeant major ones. After everything's over, he walks up to me and he gives me his first sergeant chevrons. And he tells me this, and this is, I've never heard anybody else say this, and I'm sure they have, but he tells me, listen, Quiroz, I wasn't training you to be the clerk of H&S. I was training you to be a first sergeant. And he handed me his chevrons, and that was that. And it was just like I remember crying, like not, I can't be like sobbing, but I just remember tears falling because like he cared about me enough to where he wanted to see me be in the Marine Corps longer than, 4 years, 8 years. He saw something in me that, the leadership aspect, whatever it was that he saw,
yeah.
And it's just like, holy moly, like,
Ooh.
Anyways, that was like
that moment. I can imagine that moment. Just, you took us on a journey when you're in a row and you're kind of like, hey, wait, I want to do this, but I'm, sometimes not every assignment in our leadership journey is completely clear, right? Sometimes you're like, okay, you just keep showing up because you're like, okay, this is what I'm doing in the season, right? You mentioned you're there with the infantry unit, but in this time as you're healing at your body, you're doing clerk assignments. But to have leaders, two things that's really resonating right now, and I love that you opened this up in today's conversation, because I think sometimes the movies, Hollywood, can give this certain view of Marine life or military life and experience. And I've even had a few people when I went on my assignment and I came back, and they're like, wow, this, and it was almost like a bad negative, like they yell at you and how dare them, almost like a bad form of leadership. And I remember kind of telling them, in a sense, is like, no, like you got to understand, like they to build that much trust, and they'll push you, but at the same time, it's not because they're trying to break you. Like they see more in you than you've ever thought, and it's that when you catch it, like you're saying, when you catch it, when you realize that, wow, this person isn't trying to break me, they're really here to build me. But it takes a little bit to build us, right? It takes a little bit of our own, of getting out of our own way, of our own thought process, of, a lot of things that we think we're not this, but this person is more invested in building us, that they're willing to kind of walk through that a little bit. There's a saying, I just said it on another podcast episode, and I put it on my wall. It's really simple. The shortest quote I've ever written on my wall: no pressure, no diamonds. And I love it because I'm like,
yeah.
Like that's how diamonds are made, because there's pressure. But as a leader, understanding what to do with that pressure, so being in environments that there is a ton of pressure as a leader, but knowing how to navigate through it. You really mentioned, and I think I want to thank you for sharing that experience, because I know right now the listeners, as I was listening in, they felt exactly what I felt when someone can actually be real with you. A lot of times leadership seems so disconnected, like this person is just talking to the role I'm in. Right. But when they start to speak to you beyond the role, like you said, he wasn't there to just kind of train you to be a clerk. He's seen you a few steps ahead, and you're, in that moment, I mean, it's like, whoa, what? Right. But to think of that, of having that much investment in something, I think it's a special thing in leadership. I really do. Thank you for sharing that. In a sense, as you heard that, I'm curious right now, because we heard about your response when you seen September 11th. And I love to hear, take us back to that point when he told you that, and what was your gut response? What was going on in your mind? What was going on in your heart? How did you respond? What happened next?
Well, like I said, there was some tears falling because I knew he was leaving. And I didn't know what was going to happen next. I understood that after he told me that, though, that I needed to be even better. I needed to be better than what he thought I wanted to be, because all I wanted to do was prove him right.
Mm.
And that's what was really, like, in my mind. That is what I thought about. Moving past that, as soon as I got better, I got put into a weapons company, which was, at the time, it didn't have any. I'm an 0311. So just for MOS sakes, people to understand, like, there's an 0311, there's 31s, 41s, 51, 52s. I'm an 11 basic. That's like the basic infantry guy. Right. But I got put into a weapons company who's got like the 31s, 41s, the 51s, 52s. Those guys, like, that know their stuff, only because they were transitioning them into a whiskey company, not just weapons, so that they can still do patrols like the other basic infantry companies.
Okay.
So, once I did that, I wanted to be the best there, and I got put in that group prior to going to Afghanistan. So, yeah, that's where my transition as well. Like, I understood, like, being a leader and putting out as much as you possibly could when you can. Like, how do I explain this? This is a hard one for me, because I'm just starting to understand it even more now as I'm transitioning right now. And when I was back then, when I was thinking about, like, okay, I want to be better, I want to be this, I want to be that, I didn't understand, like, how to do it. I just got to do more. Yeah. Right. I got to do more. So in Afghanistan, I was the radio operator, even though no background in it. I was a radio operator. I was a driver. I would fix the vehicles, like, for our platoon. I had to learn all of the heavy weapons, which, 240, 50 cal, just, like, I had to learn all of it because I didn't know it, because that's what we did, as an infantry guy. And I was determined to be one of the best ones to learn it all. Right. And, all I can say is this, like, at the end of my deployment, I got a certificate of commendation for my work in Afghanistan. Not everybody's going to get that. Right. A select handful will get that. Mm-hmm. But I got that. I know why I got that now, because I kept wanting to do more, and I kept succeeding at what I was doing. The thing is I had the inner will, the drive to continue to be better, but not because it wasn't for me. Honestly, it was like I said prior, I wanted to prove to Sergeant Major Frisbee that I was worthy of what he had to say. Yeah. Even though he wasn't there anymore. He wasn't even there. We're totally separate because he'd left. Like, I just wanted to prove to him that I was worthy. Like, and it had nothing to do with me per se, but more proving something to him. Yeah. I don't know if that was necessarily right. As I get older, right? Like, I understand now that, like, you have to do things for yourself so that you can understand why you're doing it, not just, I got to do this to prove them wrong, like, or prove them right. Like, yeah. I don't view things like that anymore. Yeah. But I do know that that's how I viewed it then, because I'm older now, and I understand, like, wow, there was a big part of my life where I was focused on proving somebody right instead of being the best I could be for me.
Right.
And that's a big thing.
It's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. And let me just you're bringing up something I think that's really, and I don't know if it's intentional, but let me open it up a little bit, because what's more natural and what we hear more of is this drive to prove someone wrong. It's kind of like we have a list of haters and we want to go out there and shut everybody down that doesn't believe in us, right? And some people might find some form of drive and a form of motivation with that. But I know personally, and from multiple people I've talked to, and then there's even much more studies coming out. It seems like there's a subtle but a very significant shift that happens when we're not running from something, but we're running to something. When the shift happens, when we're not there trying to prove people wrong, but we're really trying to prove people right. I mean, if you think about it, you have to prove people right, you have to focus on the right people. So
Right.
the hard thing with trying to prove people wrong all the time is that we're focusing on the wrong people. We're focused on the people that see us in our old ways or see more bad, than good in us. And our focus is wrong. And that really kind of, though, like I said, there's a form of drive with that. There's also a form of, I would say, unnecessary kind of stress that we drag along. There's much more freedom. There's much more, I'd say, I don't want to say an ease, but it is a sense of you rid that unnecessary tension when you're doing something to prove someone right, because it's like, you know what, someone's seen something in me. I'm going to prove these people right. I'm going to show up every day, even though internally I may not fully believe it. I may have my own kind of inhibitions. Someone sees it in me. I'm going to prove them right. So I love it. I really love that you kind of open that up. And I think that came out naturally, but just knowing from the research I've been doing. And then, like I said, it's a simple, but such a significant shift, because people know what you're for much more than what you're against. And people gravitate with that. We can always find a common enemy, but at the same time, if we find a common enemy, we're always trying to fight a battle that sometimes was already conquered yesterday. It's like we're trying to fight battles that was conquered yesterday. But it's like, what if we find not just common enemies, but also like just this common place of people that see more in us? So I love that you brought that up really quickly. I'd love to dive into, if we can, we're going to take a quick break for to acknowledge our sponsors on today's show. We are grateful for the opportunity that we get to be on so many different platforms because of our awesome sponsors. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
With everything changing so quickly, it can be hard to keep your team growing together. Learning better communication and keeping up with effective strategies can be difficult when you have so much more to do. That's why Po'okela Chief Development and Leadership Strategies are here to support you in your training and development goals. Who do you know that is looking to improve your staff meetings, engage one-on-one communication, scale your organization to the next level, or bring in a dynamic speaker for your next event?
We're talking with Aaron Quiroz, a good friend of mine, a neighbor, a close neighbor, but also a fellow veteran and soldier, sharing about his time in the Marines. And Aaron, let's go ahead and continue the conversation right now. But I'd love to kind of pick up where we left off. And you were sharing about your time in service. Do us a favor, take us on the journey from you being in service and then transitioning out.
Sure. Yeah. So the last 2 years of Marine Corps service, I actually helped create the Wounded Warrior Detachment here in Hawaii. Myself and a multitude of different staff NCOs, which are just basically a rank higher than me, and officers, because they, for whatever reason, they kept switching them in and out, in and out, in and out. I don't know why. I don't care why, to be honest with you. But I know I was instrumental in helping that creation happen. But that is also what helped me, as when I got out of the Marine Corps. Wounded Warrior Detachment, what do you think that is? It's right. It's us helping Marines and sailors either transition back to service or out of the service. And I learned quite a bit, like an extreme amount of stuff. And that was really, well, it was really impactful for me because all I did was constantly learn, like, okay, hey, this guy's got a gunshot in his leg. This guy, he lost his finger. This guy has, TBI, traumatic brain injury. There's just so many different things that I was learning. And, for me, I'd already had, let's see, wrist, elbow, shoulder. Yeah, that was it. Shoulder, those surgeries, right? So that's kind of the reason why I transitioned from being more into the infantry side of things, but into that because I had experience with it and they understood that. So they put me in that position and that's what I kind of did. And then when I was getting out, I got medically discharged because of my injuries, but I actually did a full 8 years. So I actually did 8 years in 4 days. So I finished my time because I actually re-enlisted, right? Because when you this, when you enlist, you do active and inactive. That's what they want to call it. So when the Marines, if you do 4 active, you do 4 inactive. So basically they can call you back, and any of that time. But if you serve continuously, that goes away. Right. So that's what I did. I re-enlisted and I served it. But nonetheless, being in the Wounded Warrior Detachment, creating that, helping, Marines and sailors transition from, like I said, back and forth. That's kind of where things happen for me where I like, okay, like I can see it works, how it works. Like I can see who's like struggling, who's not. Right. I picked up on little things from all of these Marines and sailors. Like, okay, I got to be weary of like understanding how I'm going to feel when I get out.
Right.
Right. And you said this earlier when we were talking, but like when I got out of the Marine Corps, first thing I did was I went to school. Let me go to school and get my associates and whatever, just to have it. At the same time, and for people that live in Hawaii, you're going to be like, you did that? Like, how'd you do this? And you'll hear this. I was a stevedore. Right. For McCabe, Hamilton, and Rennie. But you alluded to this again. When I was initially applying for the job, I didn't know anybody there, not a soul. And for those that live in Hawaii, that's it's impossible.
That's right.
Yeah. I know that one of the owners was prior service. I can't remember what. But one of the questions they asked me was like, what do you bring that others don't? I just said discipline. Like I have discipline. I show up when people don't want to. Like I do the work that people don't want to. That's discipline. And I didn't even like, it wasn't like I had to think about it. It's just the first thing that popped into my head.
It was the real answer, right? It wasn't the choreographed or practice answer. It was
sure.
It was your gut. It was true.
Yeah. So, but I had a few people tell me, oh, that's not realistic. You're not going to get that job. Mm-hmm. So what did I do? I proved them wrong because that's what I focused on. But truth be told, like that's the thing I was talking about earlier is that when I transitioned, it wasn't about proving others right. Like, and now I had to prove everybody wrong that said that I couldn't do this or you can't do that. Like, right. Who are you talking to? Like, I can do whatever I say I'm going to do. I'm going to do it.
Right.
And that was my biggest thing. Now that didn't last that long because I actually had to have back surgery and I didn't work there anymore after that because it's a laborious job. Mm-hmm. But doesn't matter. At the time, like transitioning out of the Marine Corps is not an easy task. Thankfully for me, I was so busy that I didn't have time to think about it. Mm-hmm. I had at the time 3 kids. Wait, let's see. Yeah, 3. And like all I did was go to school and work and take care of my kids when I had the free time. And that's all I had, I didn't have anything else to think about. And that helped me in a sense, but where it backfired is later on in life. And we can talk about that if you want, but that transition from getting out of the Marine Corps, going to school, working at, the stevedores, McCabe, Hamilton, Rennie. It was, for me, easy, only because there wasn't me sitting around not doing things and thinking about. But I had lots of friends. I mean, I have so many friends that got out.
Right. Right. I think that,
DUIs.
and I mean, I love that picture in a sense, because what you're telling us right now is that you was in a position to transition, to help others transition before your actual transition. So you seen multiple perspectives, multiple situations of what a transition can look like. And anytime we experience anything, our sense of the word for me is compassion. Our sense of understanding is just much greater, because we see where other people are coming from. So we're not so limited on just our own experience, right? So when you went through, you had your experience, but at the same time, you also brought through multiple experiences of what a transition could look like. And I love to dive in, because you mentioned that for you it was easy, but I know right now part of the Charlie Mike Project, if you could tell everyone what it does and why it does it, because what you're currently doing now, we heard about Mr. Byron, we heard about some seeds that was planted from your grandparents. Right now, currently, you're actually going ahead and you have this Charlie Mike project that you're working on. What does it do, and why does it do it?
So Charlie Mike Project is a nonprofit charity that helps all veterans. It doesn't matter if you're disabled or not. All veterans transition into some type of work for themselves. Now, that could be a multitude of things. It could be doing podcasts. As you might know, you were the first recipient of the Charlie Mike Project.
Exactly. Let me jump in and say really quickly, a huge success of Leader Seeds podcast is from the Charlie Mike Project. That's why this conversation has been brewing on my heart for such a long time. The fact that you're seeing this on YouTube right now and you're listening to it on multiple different, the computer we're streaming on is from the Charlie Mike Project, but more importantly, the connection to someone like you, brother. So go ahead. I jumped in, but why does the Charlie Mike Project do what it does?
That's a multitude of answers right there, but the basic answer to that is because I don't like seeing others struggle. That's what it is for me. I know that if I can give back, no matter what it is, I'm going to do it. If they need help with software, oh, cool. Let me try and figure it out with you. If I know the answer, then great, even better. If they need a webcam for their work, because they work from home, if they need a keyboard, mouse, whatever the case may be, I built computers where it was full on a streaming and gaming computer all in one, because that's what, the doctor ordered for that, specific veteran. So it's about giving back to others in people who are struggling, because for me, like I said, and I have a long history of struggle. I was homeless as a child, and we could talk about that another time, but if I had the help that I'm giving now, I would have been very thankful. And that's why I do it. It's not about you don't give to receive. You don't give to receive. You give to give. You give because it's going to help whoever that person is. Right. And that's very, very important for me. It's deeply rooted in my soul to be in service to others. That's just who I am.
There's a theme that just popped in my mind right now as you said that, and it's something that, as you shared, and I'll take a moment really quickly to kind of talk directly to the listeners, because for those of you listening in, we like to kind of set these episodes in a sense that you're in this conversation with us. You might be listening in driving in your car or working out or wherever you may be, but you're part of this conversation, and we do this in multiple ways that you can message us and ask questions and all, but we like to kind of keep these that we're all together at a table talking story about what we believe is important, and that's leadership. And one thing, if you're listening to the show today, that I picked up on as Aaron was sharing, was that in his journey of leadership, he recognized the need and he responded accordingly. He built this sense of observation, as he mentioned, that he would observe situations even as a child or in grade school or maybe as a new soldier, and even as he transitioned out to what he's doing now. But this keen sense of recognizing a need and responding accordingly went out there, and now it led to what the Charlie Mike Project is doing. So let's go ahead and maybe dive into really quickly. I love to kind of see, for those people that really experience this transition out of the military, Aaron, as a big thing, as much bigger than they'd imagine, because I know we talked about that a few times, and I want to have a quick conversation and your insight around that. Where what would you say for them? Because some people, when they transition out of the military, it's traumatic. It's very traumatic. It's not just a job change. It's not a career change. It's not just a location change. It's every element you can imagine, that comes together. And sometimes there's a form of trauma or hurt, that never really transitions, in a sense, right? Never really stops, in a sense. Now, I know that's a loaded question, but if you could give us two things, just to kind of time the first two things that come to mind of what you notice that helps in that transition.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is support. That's the biggest thing. Like, and that's always going to be said from an outside perspective. Like, what's your support system?
Okay.
Without my wife, without my kids in my life, my wife's mom and dad, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. And there's no shame in saying that, like, hey, I know I did the work, but they allowed me to do it. And I think a lot of times, there's a lot of credit that's not given. So credit to my family, 100% credit to my family. I know I did the work, so credit to me too, but that, they allowed me to do it. And then I guess the other thing would be, you have to know that it's not going to be easy. Like, if you come into thinking that this is going to be a cakewalk because the Marine Corps was like, I was a badass in the Marines, or a badass soldier, whatever branch you were in.
Right.
That doesn't translate into the real world. It does not. It's going to be hard, but you have to accept that it will be hard and overcome those challenges. And maybe a third one, and this is probably the most important, to be honest with you, is know when to ask for help and be able to ask for it.
Wow.
Because there is a big pride/ego that comes with coming out of the military. And a lot of times people will not ask for help because they're just too prideful. They will not. Like, I don't need your help. I'm going to do it by myself. Like, that's in my opinion, that's probably one of the biggest drawbacks that we come out of the military with. Like, because we're taught, like, you can do it, figure it out. You can do it, just do it. You know what I mean? That's what we're taught.
Right.
But when you're out and you don't have the support, because technically in the military, whatever branch you're in, you have support because you have these guys, hey, go this way, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. You don't have that when you get out.
Yeah.
Like, you don't.
So
know when to ask for help. That's probably the most important one.
Right.
Because if you don't do it, you will struggle, and you will struggle hard.
Wow. That's so good. That's so good on so many levels. I mean, asking for help can, like you said, we can be so blind to it in a sense because our training, our success has come from being somebody that just figures things out. I always figured things out. And though that's good, though that is a strength in some seasons, being able to recognize that it doesn't matter our skill set, our years of experience, our intellect, whatever we come with, we all can benefit from asking for help, by recognizing that, you know what, this is something that I don't have to do alone. This is something that, maybe I don't have the support system that someone else has, but I can build it. I can ask for help. I can reach out to people, A little quote I always go by that this is reminding me of is like, it feels like you're falling only until you reach out. Then you start to fly. If you think of a bird, like, but if we're always just like this, then we're gonna fall. We're gonna keep falling. But we gotta reach out in a sense. We gotta ask for that help, and sometimes build the support system that we wish we had. Some people have it, some people don't have it, but we all can build it by reaching out. I know the Charlie and Mike Project is there, and I know there's multiple different organizations or people that are there for this transition. So thank you for what you do with the Charlie and Mike Project, and thank you for even putting a sense of that recognition for those that support it. You mentioned your wife and your family, and everyone, that's involved in that process, because that's a very important thing. Even for those that are listening today, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about the people that allow you to do what you do.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's a very important part. Any last things you want to say as we wrap up today's conversation? I know everyone listening got a really good sense of what you're doing in your journey. And if you wanted to make sure that someone knew about you or what you're working on, what would you say?
Things that I'm working on. I do have my own
few, but go ahead and share. Yeah. Go ahead and share.
I do have my own podcast I'm working on, and it's called Mindset Driven. That's something that I'm a bit passionate about. A friend of mine, Circo, we kind of host that together, co-founders. You can find us anywhere, just Mindset Driven on all platforms. And outside of that, there's a Charlie Mike Project as well. That's kind of been on a little bit of a hiatus just because of, the pandemic. I'll just say that. But outside of that, I'm working on me. I have PTSD. I went through a really, really, really big transition where it was like, I thought it would never catch up to me. And one day it did. And that's kind of what I said earlier. And ever since, I know it's a weird day, so don't put this into any other context. It's just the same day that I had therapy on 4/20/2022. Yep. I told my therapist I didn't love myself. And that was tough to understand and realize. But that next day, I started a journey, and I'm still on that journey. But I weighed 290 pounds. Now I weigh 237. So, yeah, I want people to know that there's always time to change. There's time to become the person that you want to be for you. Don't worry about other people. I like to flex my id-gaf muscle. I'm not going to say the words, but those who know. Basically, I don't give a something. We'll just keep it like that. And that, in a sense, it's not a negative thing, just because you're not worried about the haters. You're worried about you. And like for me, I want to love myself to the point where I can wake up in the mornings and be happy. And catch yourself when somebody makes you angry. Ask yourself one question: how would you react if you loved yourself?
Wow.
A lot of people don't think about it like that. And my therapist helped me understand that. Right. I do so much now. I have a trainer. He's named Aaron Williamson. That we can go on and on, but right. I do so much things for myself. And there's 3 pillars. The 3 pillars that I live on: mind, body, and soul. Right. My mind, I'm reading a lot about Stoicism. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm sure you are, but those out there that are not, please look into it. It's very, very beneficial for the mind. Yes. I'm looking at my health. My health is me eating right, exercising twice a day. That's just how I like to live. So don't put anything on that. And for my soul, which I've actually started doing more recently, and I finally figured out that this is what is bringing me to the pinnacle of starting to love myself, is breathing and breathing techniques, diaphragmatic breathing, Wim Hof method, if you're not familiar with that. I'm doing those two things, and those are my three pillars that I live on right now. So, anyways, those are the things that I've been doing. It's a long journey, but the journey to loving yourself never ends, and that's the most important thing others should know. So, start loving yourself. What would you do? How would you react if you loved yourself? Ask yourself that.
How would I
Simple.
react if I love myself? I don't think there's any better way to wrap up today's podcast, to be honest with you. I mean, that's gonna stir and marinate for some time. And I want to encourage our listeners to do that. Let that marinate for a little bit. Don't think you have to answer that right away, but keep asking yourself that question until something clicks and something does. It's definitely one of those questions that can marinate for a bit. Aaron, brother, congratulations on the podcast. Congratulations on the journey. I was gonna say, like, there's something different. There's something different in your step. There's something different in you. There just is. And not to say it was, but just you see it when there's just there's this click that happens. And thank you for today's conversation. What you shared today was loaded. I want to encourage the listeners today. The best way to get out of these podcasts, the best way you can get anything is to marinate on them. I'm not going to ever encourage you to do something I don't do myself. When I listen to podcasts, I pause, I replay it, I go back again, and I marinate on it, and I really squeeze everything I can out of it, because there's a lot that Aaron shared today in leadership, in his journey, especially in transitions, important transitions, so important. And the ability to not just recognize a need, but to also respond accordingly. A perfect way you did it is by closing today's conversation about loving yourself as a leader. That's the best way to grow, right? The best investment is in your growth and in your healing. So as we continue to grow and heal as leaders, we can continue to be leaders that create healthy environments. Because at the end of the day, if we lead a toxic situation or lead a toxic environment, we're doing much more harm than we really can help other people. So our heart here at Leader Seeds is to be the healthy leaders that make a high impact, not just out there and making a mess and having a bunch of things look like fireworks and shine off out there. We want to do the real work, the foundational work of really going out there and setting healthy leadership. Aaron, thanks for today's episode. We'll wrap up today. Say that one more time if you can for the listeners, and we'll close off on today's message. What is the last thing you'd say, or what was it that your therapist told you in that moment when you're feeling those thoughts?
Just, what would you do if you loved yourself? How would you react?
Thanks for listening in to another awesome episode of Leader Seeds with Po'okela Mossman.